I've learned to cope with stress and to work stress and to make stress work. And I've learned to take time off from time to time. And stress can be a very damning thing. And it can lead to depression. It can even lead to physical body sickness. That you begin to really have physical ill health. You know, if you don't manage your stress very well. And it can also lead to all manners of even suicide if you're not careful. Because sometimes when you are going through stress, you are not even quite sure what you are going through and what the effect is and what the antidote is. And I'll give you a personal example from my own personal life, and I'm not ashamed to say it. In the year 2009, I think it was 2009, around February, I began to hear rumors that the Redeemed Christian Church of God, let me put it this way, will no longer need my services. I was at the time pastor in charge of the Christchurch parish of that church. It was quite a big and flourishing parish. I'd spent the best part of my youth working hard for the church, for God, and for that parish. And everything that I had in life was in that parish. Please understand that I was not married then, haven't gone through a divorce, which was also stressful. So my entire life and my well-being and my future and my past and my present and everything I could think about myself was buried in that church. Eventually around March or April, my services were no longer required, and I needed to take a rest from the church for a crime that I'm not sure that I committed. But let us leave that for another day. So when they asked me how I felt after that incident, I said, if your father dies, you know that your father has died, and you accept that the man has died, and you prepare to bury him. If your mother dies, you accept that your mother has died, and you look for her funeral. If your wife dies, you accept that your wife has died, and you look at it. If your first child dies, you say, okay, the first child died, what do I do? How do I cope? If the pregnancy in your wife is aborted, you deal with that also. If your second child has an accident and is in hospital, you deal with that. If your in-law has an accident and is in hospital, you deal with that. But if all of them die on the same day, you might as well die as well. That was what Christchurch was to me. My wife, my first child, my father, my mother, my pregnancy, and everything. So I went home and I sat down. This is a man who'd been going to church 6 a.m. every morning for about 16 years. Doing 3 videos on a Friday for about 16 years. Doing Wednesday service on a regular basis for about 16 years. Never missed a Sunday service from the day I got born again up until that time. So I went to my house and I didn't know what to do with myself. I have a friend here, his name is Tokumbo. Where's Tokumbo? He's somewhere at the back. He was my chauffeur when I was in Christchurch. And he drove the official. It was like an assistant, but then on Sundays he would drive me. And even till today, he still does that for me. He's head of my domestic affairs today. So in those days when I got to church, I drove myself to church. Then I'll pick up the church car, Mercedes or Range Rover. We had 2 cars. And then we'll go visiting and all that. And Tofumo will drive me and all that. Or sometimes we'll bring the church car home, pick me up, and then we go to church. So the first Sunday after I left Christchurch, I sat at home with my wife. By this time I was married. And we were looking at each other and wondering what to do. Then Tokumbo shows up with CC1, the Christchurch car. And I said, Tokumbo, what are you doing here? He says, I've come to take you to church. I said, which church? He said, he doesn't know. So I turned to my wife, I said, which church are we going? She said she's not going to church. I said, let's go to church. So we started doing mini, mini. And I think we ended up going to House on the Rock that day. I got to House on the Rock. The place was packed full. And they started pulling me up and down, come and sit here, come and sit there. I said, I've not come to sit anywhere, I've just come to listen and learn. The next Sunday, we went to one church in the middle of Shogolu somewhere, where somebody had been gracious enough to offer me a platform to preach. It was right deep in Shogolu. And that time there was no GPS. So we missed road about 3 or 4 times. Finally found ourselves there. The next month, Sunday, we went to Fountain of Life or something like that. The next Sunday, went to MFM. The next Sunday, we're just bouncing around churches. Then after about 3 months, I discovered that I had stomach ache. I discovered that I had pins and needles in my arm. I discovered that I was lethargic. I discovered that I couldn't wake up in the mornings. I discovered that I was sick. I was totally sick. I was sick. And this was a man who hadn't been sick for almost 12 years, apart from when I had the thrombosis experience in Israel, which is another story entirely. So I was totally sick. So I used to tell my wife every morning that I'm sick. I didn't look sick. I moved. I woke up. But I didn't feel like doing anything. I was totally out of sorts. And I kept on telling my wife that I was sick. And my wife kept on looking at me and saying, I've just married you, don't die. So eventually we went to London, and I took a place in Park Lane. I said, well, if I'm sick, I better treat myself well, if this is going to be my last holiday. So I took a very nice flat in Park Lane. And then coming down from the flat, my wife said, let's go, this is a hospital, and do a test. So I went in there. The doctor was Syrian, British Syrian, and he looked at me up and down, took my blood, took my heartbeat, took everything, told me to come back in 2 days for the results. So I went back in 2 days for the results. He looked at me up and down, looked at the results. He says, there's nothing wrong with you. I said, it's not possible. I said, I don't feel well. I've not felt well for 6 months. He says, young man, I tell you there's nothing physically wrong with you. I said, check your results very well. And he looked at me, I checked his results. There's nothing wrong with you. Then I whispered to him, I said, check for. I had to do that because my young wife was standing next to me. So he said, what did you say? I said, I didn't say anything. He's back. When you talk, when the pastor is talking, miracles happen. Lawyers appear and disappear. So I said, well, if you insist I should check for HIV, I will. So he took my blood again and told me to come back in 2 days. In 2 days, I made sure my wife wasn't with me, just in case the results were whatever rubbish results they would be. So I went there, he looked at me and says, my friend, you don't have any HIV. But I said, I'm sick. He says, well, I'm sure you're okay. I don't know what's wrong with you. Then he looked at me and says, have you been through stress lately? I said, stress? Stress? I said, Babala stress. He said, what's that? I said, Babala iya stress. Then I looked at what I've been through and I realized that I've been through stress. And he says, that must be the problem. Just go home, take a long sleep, and by the time you wake up, you'll be okay. I said, I'm not going. You must give me medicine. I'll come to the doctor. Doctor gives medicine. You can't tell me that I should just go home and sleep and then I'll be okay. He says, I have no medicine to give you. I said, then I need to see your doctoral certificate because I am sick. He said, okay, if you insist on having medicine, take this one, chlorocanica, something, phenicol, something. I said, no problem. Take this other one, piscine, something, tristin. No problem. So I went to the pharmacy, bought the medicine, went back to him. How do I take these medicines? He says, well, this one, take 1 tablet now, and then this one, take 1 tablet when you want to go to bed. No, this one, take 2 tablets now, take 1 tablet when you want to go to bed. Tomorrow morning, if you don't feel better, take 2 tablets of this, and when you want to go to bed again, take 1 tablet of this. I said, very good. This medicine, now you are a doctor. They sound very sophisticated and very nice medicine. I'm sure it will work. He says, by the way, but what are these medicines? He said, well, this first one is called paracetamol. He says, otherwise known as paracetamol. This one is just something to make you sleep. I am telling a true story. This thing happened, I think, in July 2009, or August or September 2009. I still have the medical certificate. I said, is that what you are giving me? He said, yes. So I went up to my flat, dropped the medicines in a drawer, and I fell asleep. And by the time I woke up at 10 a.m. the next day, from 4 p.m., I was totally fine. You know, a lot of people are on serious medication today that they don't need. Yeah. And that medication has caused a side effect in their lives that is putting them in hospital on a regular basis simply because they are stressed, or they are not forgiving somebody, or they are angry, or they are bitter, or they are aggressive, or they have an incident in their childhood that created mental imbalance for them. I see it all the time as a pastor. People sit in front of me with all sorts of problems, but most of it is psychological or spiritual and needed nothing to do with medicine. And then the medicine kicks in a side effect, and before you know it, you're a regular patient making money for some doctor and possibly some lawyer as well. Because when you're sick, you have to see a doctor. You know these lawyers, in and out, they make money. When it's time for election, they are jubilating. Whether they win or lose, I will make money. When it's after election, they are jubilating also. I wish I had studied more. I wouldn't be stressed at all. But how do you deal with stress? Number one, give your life to Jesus. I have no apology for saying that, because I gave my life to Jesus Christ. When I was also stressed, I lost money in finance house. And that was what prevented me from suicide. That little voice inside that told me that you can do it again. Give your life to Jesus. Be born again. Because he's the controller of the universe. And he can determine what happens to you, good or bad. If you are prayerful, if you give your life to Jesus Christ, he didn't say there will be no stresses or storms. But he says, I will be with you in the midst of the storm. If I had not been born again, maybe I'd have gone to a wrong doctor, wrong diagnosis. And today they'll be saying that Pastor Ituah has all sorts of ailments. But today I'm 62 years old. And people think I am 35 or 40. Because I have learned somehow by his grace to cope with the stress of dealing with 4,000, 3,000 congregants with different kinds of problems. And I can tell you that I hardly sleep. I go to bed around 12, 1, by 4 a.m. I am up. Sometimes I wake up at 2, I'm answering text messages. And by the day, I'm okay. In the middle, I have a small nap, 5 minutes, and I keep going. I still play football. I scored 2 goals 3 weeks ago. Even though the third goal was assisted, but at least I scored 2 good goals. Number 2, know that everything has an end. It will come to an end. Everything has an expiry date. I have not seen any problem that does not have a solution. If it doesn't have a solution, then it is not a problem. It is something else. So you must reassure yourself that this problem has a solution. And there's a solution somewhere. And usually the solution is not too far away from you. It's just maybe 2 or 3 phone calls away. The solution is usually near enough to you. So let that give you confidence that somehow you are going to go through this. You are going to go through this. Number 3, seek help. A problem spoken about or shared is half a problem. But please seek help in the right place. Don't go to the wrong place that they will dump you in. Once somebody is carrying your problems for you, seeking help, and somebody is helping you, either mentally, emotionally, or spiritually, or a combination of everything, then you are halfway there. Number 4, please pray. Pray so that the owner of the universe will make things happen for you. And then number 5, be bold and courageous. And face that challenge in the face. And tell that challenge that greater is it that is in me, that is in you, that is in the challenge. Most times I find that those things that causes stress are usually shadows. You know, they're images, mirages that are not really real. Today, if you ask me, Pastor Ituah, you were kicked out of Redeemed Christian Church of God. How do you feel about it? All that stress and all that energy. I'll simply whisper, it's the best thing that happened to me. Your stress usually is the beginning of a breakthrough. If you see it as such, then you will use it as such, and it will become your friend and not your enemy. It's the best thing that happened to me. Ladies and gentlemen, God bless you.